Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. We are MythVision. Karen De La Carriere is joining us again today. How are you, Karen?
I'm doing great. Really good.
I'm glad you're joining us again. You
Derek.
You too. And you were talking about, we have this lawyer expert who is defending Scientology, trying to make it out to seem like a persecuted group that just is doing no harm. It's all of these people who just hate it and they don't like it. And they're the ones who are painting a picture that isn't true about Scientology. You care to fill us in on who this person is, what they've been doing, and then we can get into some more depth.
Yeah, the guy's name is Massimo Introvigne, and he comes out of a town in Italy. And he's on the payroll of the cult. Now, there's a whole clique of them. It's not just Massimo. There's a whole gang of people who've learned that they can make money under the table. They can get some nice regular income by writing papers and being willing to be expert witnesses. And they have some credentials. Massimo is just a lawyer. That's him. He poses as some kind of academic authority. He's never worked in a university. Now, freedom is Scientology pumping him up. This is a Scientology publication, Freedom. Do you see how they're using him as a mouthpiece, right? And what he does is he takes away the word cult and he has redefined it as a new religious movement. These cult apologists who apologize and get money under the table from Scientology, the Unification Church, they're bribed, they're hired guns to puff. They're just puffing and huffing of the goodness of these new age religions. Hogwash. They never cover the brutality. They never cover the punishments. The sexual molestations are all covered. You see, in Scientology, you cannot report a crime to law enforcement. That is a no-no. You can only report misconduct to their own ethics officers or to OSA. It is highly forbidden. You can be expelled from the cult for reporting a crime to law enforcement. This is doctrine. This is absolute. It's hardwired into you from day one. We handle our own morality. We don't trust governments. We don't trust the courts. They're completely untrustworthy. So Massimo has done over 70 essays praising the cult of Scientology without ever getting into the kidnappings, the torture, the interrogations that go on day after day, month after month. None of this is ever covered. That's why I call it puffing. Derek, did you know that there are apologists? Did you know that there's a whole stream of people, Gordon Melton comes to mind, that are on the payroll of the cult to make the cult look good? Did you, in all the academics, and you don't have anybody else on the payroll of cult. This is a lucrative opportunity. If you're willing to really praise the church and take away the word cult and call it a new religious movement. Now, the reason the word religious is used is the First Amendment. If they're a religious movement, hey, hands off. They're a religion. Derek?
Yeah. So with my academics, I think at best once in a while, and one of them might be a pastor or someone who's employed by the church. but they're in no way, the ones that I'm dealing with, being apologetic. In fact, oftentimes the academics who do work in ministry that I talk to will point out flaws. They'll point out pros and cons, right? They'll be equally distributive about what, we've got some priests that have really done some seriously horrific things in the Catholic Church or whatever it might be. And they don't shy away from it. Like, whereas this, I suspect, not having read his 70 articles or his publications, I imagine everything's there to pat them on the back and to make them look good. If they start talking about, about this Free Winds cruise, no, I bet you she's wrong and the church is right. About David Miscavige's abuse and things like that. Well, that's not really true. They're lying. And I wonder if this apologist, this lawyer, actually goes out of his way to align and agree with everything of the statements that the church is saying. And therefore, here we pay you to just kind of agree and become yes men. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case. I would be curious to see what he writes in his articles. But if he's actually going out there and he's pointing out the bad while trying to say, well, there's some good benefits you can get out of Scientology. Nobody said there isn't. But you can get just as good of benefits in Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormon FDLS or the Moonies or any other cult for that matter. You can find benefits, but the risk reward is not worth it once you weigh out the balance. So I suspect he's just doing what most Christian apologists that I encounter do. Well, the Bible talks about slavery. It mentions actually being able to own other humans in the Old Testament. What do the Christian apologists that I bump into try to say? That wasn't really slavery. Why? Because it looks really bad if your God says in the law you can own other human beings. And in fact, you can beat them if they don't do what you tell them to do, as long as you don't kill them. So there are Christians who go out of the way to try and say slavery wasn't really slavery in the Bible. It was indentured servitude. So the only way they could survive is if they ended up giving their time. I'll work for you for 7 years. We called it slavery back then, but it wasn't really slavery. You can do this with many other examples biblically. And most of the honest academics that I get come on who are Christians say, no, it was slavery and it was ugly and it was bad. But we as a human race have learned better. And we are heading in a direction where we don't practice those things. That was what it was like in the Bronze Age, or that was what it was like in the Iron Age. We're out of that, or that was what it was like in the first century. And we're trying to get out of it. So at least they acknowledge the ugly and they don't hide it. Is this guy hiding it, it seems?
Scientology has defended its hideous punishments by calling it religious discipline. That's the term. Norman Starkey, high executive at the time, he said, this is just religious discipline. We are a tough religion. We're not turn the other cheek religion. No, he implied we are hard, high in morality and ethics, and our punitive disciplines measure this high morality that
Well, it's no different, Karen, than what was going on with the Jehovah's Witnesses recently in Australia. So they had a court case about some sexual child molestation cases. Something was going on, and they have an internal code where you have to go to elders, and then the elders decide if there's more than 2 or more witnesses. Like, it's like your stepdad and the daughters at home. Imagine something happens. No one's there to validate. She goes to scream, hey, I got raped. And they go, well, we don't have 2 or more witnesses. Now, why is that a problem? The Bible says when there are 2 or more witnesses, then it's true. But we can't take the case if there aren't 2 or more witnesses. So this cult still practiced this idea of 2 or more witnesses. And if the elders don't have that, or they judge that, no, we just don't have enough evidence to really prove anything, then the investigation just kind of stops and law enforcement doesn't get informed. And Australia like their Supreme Court or whatever, their large court system has been involved in this. This sounds very similar, what you're describing here, on trying to keep it all in their own tight-knit bubble and not letting it get to law enforcement as the Jehovah's Witnesses. And we call them a cult. So this new religious system, get out of my face with that lingo, because we know this is invading the bite model. Stephen Hassan, that your wonderful husband is going to connect me with, he's written on this. He is a cult expert. And this is categorized as a cult. So no matter how you want to change it, I think more people need to keep going out there calling it what it is. Don't let new people just try to reframe it, because what's going to end up happening is if they start allowing the language of just religion be used, well, guess what? Then we're now going to start calling religion and all forms of religion cults. If you want to start blurring those lines, then all religions start to become cults, if you want to do that. And in some way they are, in some ways, the variations on the bite model of how they invade your privacy and invade your thinking and control your life differ depending on each religion. But you can call it a religion, it's still a cult. But this is the things you've described on here is like, this is nutty. This is a little, I don't know.
Massimo, well spoken, Derek. Massimo is much more sinister than just writing some puff pieces for Scientology. He and his clique of cult apologists, they're a gang. There's got to be 15, 20 guys around. They put on religious conferences. They intend to change the law. They're invading the legal system. They're going to judges and law enforcement and, lawmakers, congressmen, to actually change the law. So they're way more, they're not just sitting on their butt writing a few essays. They're influencers. So it's very, very sinister, because there's so much gray area on this concept of undue influence. Massimo says there's no such thing as brainwashing. Brainwashing is a fantasy word. Well, when you are very overwhelmed and beaten up and kidnapped by Scientology, and just you can be brainwashed. I mean, what is the definition?
It's called indoctrination. And without a doubt, absolutely, people are heavily indoctrinated to think some of the craziest things you can imagine. And they believe them. They're not lying. They really believe them. And I honestly think that's what's going on with David Miscavige's wife. I think that she is so indoctrinated. If she's not a vegetable by now, she's a robot.
Boy, does she have data that could just burst open everything. But as you say, well, she was dropped off at the Apollo at 11 years old. And she had no schooling, no outside. Her whole life has just been, it's like these poor FLDS kids who grow up in that. They grow up to get married and produce babies. And that's their entire life. Anyway, so I wanted to point out that Massimo was way more sinister and deadly than just writing puff pieces. He organizes conferences, and they invite legitimate religions. They call it a religious conference, but to give themselves legitimacy. Mainstream religion. People like to be invited to an international conference of other religion. You see, so lines are being merged. True religions and this phony baloney using the tag of religion only to get freedom of religion of the First Amendment. And there's no laws, Derek, there's no laws against high abuse in these cults.
That is the hard part.
This is where they're calling it religious from our doctrines, and judges traditionally don't like to interfere with freedom of religion.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as they say it's in our doctrines, the RPF was written by Hubbard, the Rehabilitation Project Force, this miserable 8 hours a day, hard manual labor, 5 hours a day, indoctrination, coughing up your crimes. This is a Hubbard doctrine. So they get away with it. Do you see how the laws need to be tweaked, take into consideration heavy torture, child trafficking, all kinds of trafficking within these cults?
Absolutely. In fact, you sent me a clip too about a actress who obviously was indoctrinated. And of course, in this particular interview, she finds Jesus. This is one of the things that helped her kind of get out of the Scientology cult. But I wanted to play that clip, if we can, of what they're selling and what I think attracts people into this. They get, they always say, oh no, everything's good. And then you get stuck. Then they get you. Can we play that?
Yes, please.
So what Scientology, again, like so many other deceptions in the world today, is really leading people to believe is that they are God, that they can become God. They can become godlike. And that's the goal of Scientology.
So if I may comment on this, while I think she may be coming from a theological kind of angle in a way, because she's probably a Christian now who thinks that that's blasphemy and wrong to, try to equate yourself with God. I think the selling point is offering people this, you're going to have your own planet. If you go to Mormonism, men will become gods and they will have their own planet. Now, I think she's theologically trying to say, I think that's false. Like, I don't think that's really true. But I think the selling point is this selfish desire to become immortal, to become something that will last forever. And it's innate in all of us because we don't want to die. In fact, the whole point is to survive death. We don't want to die. We want to survive as long as we can. The name of your YouTube channel, Surviving Scientology. They're offering you this package that is just, anyone would want it. And they're feeding you a science fiction saying, you're going to live forever. You're going to be a god and you're going to have this great, glorious state. And all of this is the same thing that gets packaged in all of these other cults. There are forms of Christianity, if we can go back, just so I can jab a little to be fair, because I think she's coming from the Christian side saying all these other false things. Christianity offers immortality, to be with God forever. And in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, you can actually become deified, where you become like on par with God in terms of becoming deified. So it's something I think that sells really well. And I think Scientology is just hijacking a very old system, attaching science fiction, L. Ron Hubbard's imagination, to older religious models, and then selling them to people to get them hooked. Because if it works for them, and it's been working for thousands of years, if you're a smart cult person, you're going to copy and mimic models that work. And this is what I think that they're doing. And she bought it. That's why she's discussing in this whole show that she did. And we'll put that link in the description for people to be able to go watch if they're interested. But I think that's why she bought it initially. That's why I bought it. Is I wanted to live forever in heaven, and I want to have a mansion, and I wanted to have these great things. So people kind of get stuck in these cults because they seem benevolent, but really they're malevolent. They have a malevolence about them. They have actually deep down sinister motives of using them, sucking them dry of everything they have to offer.
Beautifully spoken. Derek, I want to end off this little segment with a little anecdote story. Derek, in my last day in Scientology, I just the last 40 years of my life, I've been a good little Scientologist, obedient, following it all, practicing it all. And I was quite a powerhouse even when I was in very high level. And now I was leaving it, departing it. The words of loyalty, disloyalty were flashing in my mind. And this was the last day. The next day, I was going to announce to the world on Marty's blog, which in those days were read by 20,000 people a day. I was going to announce my very public departure. So do you know what I did, Derek?
What'd you do?
Derek, I was raised in the Anglican Church, which is very similar to, it's Protestant, but its blood brother is Catholicism.
Right.
And in Los Angeles, there's a multi-million-dollar church in the heart of downtown called the Church of Our Lord. I'll give you the name. This is a multi-million-dollar church with glass windows, and the sun comes in streaming in different. The architecture is phenomenal. People go there just as tourists to look at it. Mm-hmm. It's very wealthy. It shows the Catholic wealth. And you know, I was in turmoil. I was leaving this cult after 40 years. So guess what I did? I went back to my Protestant Catholic roots. I went in there. And the music was playing Ave Maria. There's constant music. And I went down the different, there's people like Cary Grant, a 1940s movie star. Their ashes are all, the famous people who were Catholics are all entombed in the lower levels of this cathedral. It's a showpiece of the Catholic Church in Los Angeles. And I went down and I was sort of meditating. I kneeled on one of the, and I was just thinking and thinking, tomorrow I'm leaving Scientology. And there were some humble Latinos, and I was comparing the inside of this big Catholic cathedral with Scientology. Nobody was trying to get my cash. Nobody was hitting on me for more money.
Right.
Nobody was trying to sell or pitch anything to me. I walked through the aisles. I looked at all these famous people buried, their ashes at any rate there. And I wandered through, and then the music was playing in organ music. And, you know, I felt a kind of inner peace. This is kind of strange because it wasn't like I was going to go back to Christianity or anything, but I was just doing comparisons with how I could feel a sense of peace in my roots. And the next day, I was gone from Scientology with a big announcement. I've often thought about how I felt a sense of tranquility in a Catholic cathedral on my last day in Scientology. Any comment?
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, when you compare, Scientology is just horrible. I mean, the things you've described are just horrible. Now, the version of it that maybe Tom Cruise has is the whole wishful thinking they're trying to sell everybody who walks in the door, but not everybody's getting that. So, you know, if everybody had Tom Cruise's version of Scientology, we wouldn't be having this episode. You wouldn't be interested in exposing it. But the fact that you have the freedom to walk in and walk out and do as you please with these larger churches, they don't micromanage the things you do. This is where Stephen Hassan, the cult expert, would point to you. Like, there are certain degrees in which maybe there are checks and ticks that the church that you're describing here might click. But in comparison, every single check is almost on the page for Scientology, FLDS, extreme versions of, Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, and other versions of cults that might be out there, the Moonies, whoever, that micromanage your movements, your thoughts, your everything. And I get that sense of tranquility and stuff from other things that I explore in the world and compare the freedoms that I have now from the cult that I feel I was part of, that micromanaged me, that showed up to my house on a Sunday saying, you broke Sabbath and why are you doing this? And they wanted to have my wife stop working, and they wanted to fund us so that we didn't have her working anymore, so that our bills were paid, so that I could be full-time in this church and she didn't have to be anything but a housewife, watching children, staying at home, cooking, cleaning, and become the obedient woman she was created to be. Mm-hmm. And so there are degrees in which it is intense, but I'm glad you got to the day before you left, got to kind of mirror it and go, I can come and leave here. Nobody's going to tell me, command me, demand me, any of that. I don't feel the pressure. I'm not going to have to feel that. And I could come and go as I please at a church like this. And I think that's important. So I want people to realize, like, you don't have to go full skeptic like me. You don't have to leave it all and forsake any belief of gods or belief systems. Go and study and look up Bite Model, for example, and see if the church, the groups that you're a part of, if they're a cult, if they are checking off these ticks. Mm-hmm. One more thing, Karen, when I was in rehab, I went into a detox center as a drug addict. I thought I just let it get the best of me. I did not know I was a drug addict, by the way. I went into this detox and they had these little pamphlets, and I started reading, and it's like, have you ever stolen to get your drug? Oh, yeah, check. Have you ever done it? Oh yeah, check. Did you lie about this to your wife? Check, and you start doing that. And after a while, you're like, okay, what's the point? You get to the back and it's like, if you have checked more than 50% or whatever the amount was, you're probably a drug addict, which means you have a serious issue. This is not just a choice. There's more to this. And it scared me, but I needed to kind of start to chew on it and accept it. And it was over months that I realized I need to get real help. There's something really wrong with me. And I did. I got professional medical help. I started getting, my life together, and then I relapsed down the road, but that's a whole nother story. My point is, check the Bite Model, see if the group you're a part of checks off some of these high control, marks, if you will, on the BYTE model. Go Google it, look it up, and say, yeah, are they controlling that? Do they make me, do I need to financially do this, that? And if there's these things being checked off, you might want to think about the group you're involved in. It's probably a cult. It walks like a duck, talks like a duck. So Karen,
it is a duck.
Yes. But yes, thank you for sharing that with me.
Well, Derek, I kneeled on the pews and I wept. It was goodbye to everything I'd ever known. No one would ever talk to me, and no Scientology friend of mine. Everyone I had lived with and breathed with for the last 40 years, disconnection, Scientology, And, but because of crowds of people leaving, there were a few hundred people who'd already crossed, who welcomed me with open arms. But why I told you that was how interesting that I would go back to my Catholic Protestant roots on the eve of departure of 40 years of my life. I went back to a former belief structure with looking for comfort.
Right.
Anyway, I told the story, and Derek, your response was terrific as usual.
Thank you.
So we will be in touch. There's lots of breaking news occurring. Thank you for watching this right to the end. If you've stayed with us to the end, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
See you again.
I really appreciate it, Karen. I hope everybody takes the time to go subscribe to your YouTube channel, hit the bell so you're notified every time she drops a new one. Rest in peace to Ron Miscavige here. It's really sad how that all ended. And anyway, I hope you go check out those videos with her and him. And I've also done recordings in the past with Karen. So please check us out in the description. You want to help us out? We could use it to keep doing what we're doing and exposing harmful cults like Scientology. When someone tries to tell you it's just a new religious movement, you could just say, yeah, a new cultish religious movement. Got it. And check out the Bite model. Go see if your particular views fit into that category. Karen, thank you so much for this interview and your time. I look forward to next time.
Love you, Derek. Thank you.
You as well.
Bye-bye.